college, and consistently every year they conduct a camp in the campus. So they ensure that the students are healthy. And it was detected most of the students are anemic. And we also have taken a lot of efforts to ensure the good health of the students. And currently, the times today are more uncertain. There is a lot of competition. The world is so dynamic that people have to face uncertainties day in and day out. There are so many distractions. And it is very apt to have a person, Katie Pai ma'am, to address our students amidst a time we are just started recovering after the pandemic. So I think this is the right forum where we will be very happy to listen from a psychologist from Apollo. We are so privileged. Our students are so privileged to be able to attend the session, attend this session today. Once again, my heartfelt thanks to you, ma'am, for joining us today. We hope that the program will be extremely beneficial to all the students who are feeling too stressed because of the challenges they have to face and launch a career very soon. Hearty welcome once again, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your words of encouragement. Participants, please maintain patience as our doctor has some network issues. She will join us very soon.
Am I audible, ma'am? Ma'am, am I audible, ma'am?
Now, I call upon Mrs. Mahalakshmi Coordinator, Assistant Professor, Department of Nutrition, Food Service Management and Dietetics to brief about our chief guest of the day.
Welcome to the webinar on Be Stressed Now, Ask Me How. I take this opportunity to welcome today's guest speaker, Dr. Kirti Pai, an expert clinical psychologist for this webinar today. She has passed her MPhil in clinical psychology from KMC Manipal and PhD from Madras University. Currently, she is consultant clinical psychologist in Apollo Hospitals and partner in Element H Psychological Support Services. She is also a guest faculty in the Institute of Mental Health Chennai. She is
He is also a guest faculty
She is
in the Institute of Mental Health Chennai. Ma'am is Joint Secretary of CNACP. Ma'am has got trained in marine psychology from Denmark in 2011, and Ma'am is involved in psychological assessment and therapy for seafarers in Southeast Asia. Ma'am is also a certified clinical supervisor from ACA Australia. It's an honor and privilege for us to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Participants can post their queries in the chat box as they will be answered at the end of the session. Stage is all yours now, ma'am. Over to you.
A warm good morning, dear faculty members and dear students. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible, ma'am.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much at the onset for inviting us as part of the Apollo Shine Foundation for the outreach program where all of us are together talking about different aspects of physical and mental health. So my role here is to talk about mental health, especially it's a privilege to be standing here talking about mental health, especially with the Women's Day just over and looking at young minds and young beautiful girls smiling at me. Yes, so thank you very much, and thank you dear ma'am also for inviting us from the Apollo Shine Foundation. So what I would do today is take you through different aspects of mental health, also about stress, because stress is something which is very commonly seen and spoken about in our real world everyday life. So I would talk to you a little bit about stress, how much of stress is difficult stress, how much of stress is necessary for us. And I would then talk to you and take you through different stress management aspects, because that's what we are focusing today. De-stressing is what we are looking at. Yeah. At the end of my presentation, maybe about 35 to 40 minutes later, I would be happy to take on questions and your own reflection. So let me begin with asking you all this question of how many of us have felt that, you know, post the 2019, that life has been difficult, you know, because we have been sitting inside the house, inside the room, where we had the freedom earlier on till 2019, early stages of 20, where we could just walk out of the house anytime without mask, feel the fresh air blowing across, and we could just call up a friend or call up somebody and just move on, go to the cafeteria, go to a hotel, go to the park, and just, you know, enjoy life as it is. So I'm sure all of you, if this was a real program where I could meet you in physical aspect. I'm sure all of you would have smiles on your face, and I'm sure you're doing that even now. Yes, thank you, Vigneshwari, for showing your face. So all of us are here going through this so-called stress of pandemic. So what we are also looking at is this is something which is ubiquitous. All of us are going through it, but that doesn't mean that we have to be stressed down, bogged down under the pressures of the pandemic, right? So let me take you through the screen sharing. So the only stress I have during the webinars is the technical stress. So, because this is something beyond us, many times, suddenly there may be an internet lag or an audio or delay, and that becomes difficult. Yeah. Otherwise, life is as good as before. Yes. So, yeah, that's my first slide. Let me go down to the next slide. Yes. So this is something which was sent to me by a student. So because we do a lot of programs, and I do have both telecounseling and physical counseling for students and young adults, and also the other age groups. Yeah. So this is something which somebody told me. I stress about stress even before there is even anything to stress about, and it really rang to me because most of the time we are constantly talking about stress, constantly stressing about stress, even when things are going okay. So that is also something which we need to be aware of, because we are thinking of stress as something which is part and parcel of our life. Yeah. So, but what exactly do we mean by stress? Stress is a state when there is information processing is inhibited because there is an added expectation load. So there are 2 points here. So we do have the skills, we do have the knowledge, we do have information. But what happens is there is some inhibition in the processing of the knowledge, processing of the information, because there is a load in the expectation. And I would detail that more as we move ahead. What we also understand is that there is no discrimination when it comes to stress and anxiety and mental health aspects. Anybody of any gender, any orientation, any age, any racial or cultural priorities, we do not have any discrimination when it comes to stress, because stress is something which is commonly seen in everyone, right? And it's important that we understand that there are both short-term and long-term effects of stress. What we need to look at is, just because we are talking about stress and being stressed and being worried and all of that, we also have to understand that certainly because of all of this is having an negative effect on our body and the mind. That's the reason why we constantly think of de-stressing, stress management techniques, effectively handling the stress and all of that, right? So to give you a brief, short-term stress, what happens is it influences concentration, it influences productivity, and in the long term, it definitely influences our hormonal and body physiological changes, right? We also need to understand that some bit of stress, and I will detail this a little while later, some bit of stress actually helps people to focus and concentrate better. So if there was no stress, so like for example, if there were no board exams, there was a time in 2021 when board exams were called out for, and we know that there was a lot of stress on how we would do board exams. And then when everything was suddenly stopped, people were kind of people didn't know, the students didn't know what to do, and that again was another kind of stress. Yeah. So some bit of stress is definitely helping people to focus, move ahead, and that's the the motivation which people talk about. So totally zero stress is nothing going to be there. It's definitely no life there when there is absolutely no challenge, right? What we also need to understand, this is from Hansel, which is who is a physiologist and a psychologist who's done a lot of stress-related research. And what he says is that stress is an automatic physical reaction to a danger or a demand. So the danger and the demand could be real or it could be perceived. So like, for example, if I think that, there would be a technical difficulty and I would not be able to present the program properly, that could be a real problem or it could be a perceived problem. And depending on that, I can get worried, I can get stressed out. Or if I think that there would be a tiger which could just come into the Apollo hospitals and kill me, that it is definitely a imaginary perceived threat, right? So what we are looking at is, whenever there is the mind telling us that, there is going to be something which is beyond us, it could be an exam, it could be an expectation, it could be a demand from parents, it could be demand from anybody else, which translates into a physical reaction. It could be palpitations, it could be giddiness, it could be something to do with your gastrointestinal system, could be anything which relates to the physical aspects of the body. How do we usually react when there is stress? What happens is, this is a very commonly spoken about theme: fight, freeze, or flight. What happens when there is a lot of stress is people either get ready to fight. I would want to fight it out. It could be physical, it could be cognitive. It could also be fly away, move away, run away from this place. I can't face this anymore, right? If the stress becomes, if the anxiety becomes too much, the body just goes into freeze position, like how in childhood we would play the statue game. Something like that, where the body just is there. That things are moving around, but I don't know what's happening with me. I'm sure many of us would have gone through it when there is high levels of, it could be exam stress, it could be relationship stress, it could be any kind of physical health stress. So it could be, too many aspects put together. So what we need to understand is, these are the body reactions because of the adrenaline and the cortisol. Those are the hormones, neurochemicals, which work on our body whenever there is stress. So what we also understand is that when the cortisol levels go up, it means that there is definitely a stress working on you, and we definitely need to work on that. Right? So remember that fight, freeze, or flight is the body's reaction to all the external and the internal stress which is happening. Yeah. What we also need to understand is that externally and internally, so external stress would be the pandemic, exams, relationships, expectations from parents, and all of that. Internal stress could be PMS, it could be tiredness, it could be sleep deprivation. So internal, external stress, along with how do we evaluate that I can cope up with this external and internal stress, is actually determining the level of stress. So that determines your perception of stress. So it is not only the external stress, it is also how do you evaluate your coping ability. So if you feel, okay, I've dealt with this earlier, I have the skills, I have the support system, the evaluation, the perception that I am confident itself would reduce the stress, because you can manage it. Yeah. And how do we do that? As we move ahead a little while later, because I would want also to tell you about this curve, which is by Dodson, which is a very interesting research done in the 1980s, and it still holds true even in 2022. What we understand is that the performance and the stress have a connection. What happens is there is always that comfort zone. So students, if I have to talk to you, you would say that till a date of the exam, a few days before exam, you are relaxed and chill, and you would want to watch your Netflix and browse through your Instas and all of that, right? But as the days come nearer to the exam, what happened is you are moving away from your comfort zones. You know that now I need to start working, and that's where the actual performance happens. But if the stress goes beyond that, if the demands are beyond that, that's when the performance goes down.
Ma'am? Audience, please stay connected with us. Ma'am is having some technical issue. Ma'am will join soon. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Hello. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, there was unexpected electricity problem. We're just trying to figure out how to sort it out. Yeah. All right. Never had this earlier. Yes. All right. So I hope I'm audible enough for everyone, and I'll continue. And if somebody could help me with the PPT, it will be very helpful till we log in through the laptop.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are
All right.
audible, ma'am. Again, we have some network.
Oh, okay.
Within
Okay.
minutes, we will
Right.
think,
Right.
ma'am.
By then, I hope our technical glitches also gets set. Yeah. Ma'am, please let me know if you've got the PPT and if it is possible to share. We are also trying from our side.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll
Yeah,
take in
yeah,
some 5 minutes, ma'am.
yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we are presenting, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, all right. And I hope things go smooth from here. Yeah. So, what I was discussing earlier is the uh, performance and the anxiety part of the performance. So, what happens is beyond a certain level of expected time, the deadline, many times what happens is the anxiety kind of goes beyond the threshold, and that's when people get into illness. So then people fall sick, people start feeling more tired, people start being more irritable, they have sleep disturbance, they are not able to eat well, or they have different body pains. So what happens is all of this adds on to the performance down. So, when performance was going well, the body reacts in a positive manner. But when the anxiety goes up, the body starts reacting in a way which is physiologically not helpful. And that kind of pulls down the performance. And that's what we see here in the graph, that till an optimum level of anxiety, the performance is good. So we also have to look at what is the comfort level that we have, which helps us to understand that within this comfort level we can start taking in more challenges, we can start using our coping skills, we can develop more better coping skills. So how it helps is that it also helps people to understand that beyond this level, that is distress for me. So we also talk about something called eustress, which is good stress, which helps people to look at, this is the comfort level which I have in handling stress, and that's the eustress. But when the stress goes beyond that, it becomes distress, which is disturbing stress. And when stress becomes disturbing stress, that's when the body starts reacting to, and we do have different difficulties of in sleep, in appetite, in body pain, in tiredness, and all of that, right? So can we go to the next slide? So the reason why we are discussing this is, as students, we also need to look at how much of stress is good for us. Yeah. If you can just click twice, there are two more lines which come there. Yeah. So what we need to look at, as I told you earlier, there are short-term and long-term aspects to it. In a very short-term, immediate aspect, of course, some bit of stress is helpful, but we also have to look at whether the short-term anxiety can help us in enhancing performance, makes us more resilient, improves immune system because there is a push in the immune system, and that prepares the body for any of the emergency situations. Only when it becomes prolonged stress or distress, disturbing stress, then it becomes more difficult, as I was explaining right now. Can we go to the next slide? So what we also need to understand is that what can be stressing you out right now, because it's important that it could be different in each person. So but generally, if you look at student population per se, it could be academics, it could be health, it could be time management, it could be expectations from family, friends, and other faculty members, and all of that. And if it is an adult, it would be more of health, finances, it could be family members. So each population per se has different things stressing you out, right? It's also important that we are aware of all of this, because when we know that these are topics or these are factors which are stressing, then it's also easier to work on the resources which we have to handle these factors which are stressing you out, right? Can we move ahead? So what do we understand is that this is a very important question which I would want all of us to look at. Do we work to live or live to work? Do we eat to live or live to eat? And this is a question which is debatable throughout. I think I've seen this debates going on many, many times. How much of work we need to do and how much do we also take time out in that 24-hour time frame of a day to rest, to have entertainment and recreation, to be with the loved ones, and also, of course, study and work. We also have to understand that how much do we need to spend as in time to eat, or do we need to take rest and eat and recreational aspects and all of that. So these are questions which come to our mind, which also helps us in time management. Yeah. The next slide, please. So as we move ahead, we are looking at the impact of it, right? So we all agree that there is a connection between body and the mind, right? So we know that whenever there is anything stressing us, it could also definitely have an effect on the emotional aspects. So we can get angry, irritable, upset, frustrated, all of that. It can also relate on to our behaviors. It can also relate on to how we behave when we feel stressed out. It could be when we are angry, people can shout, people can throw things. When we are sad, people can cry, people can sulk, people can move away from others. And what happens to the thoughts? So all of this also influences our thought as to, when people are sad, people think that I am no good, there is nothing in life for me to look forward to, where am I leading on to, things like that, right? So what happens is the thoughts, the emotions, and the behavior definitely has a huge effect on the physiology of the body, and that's what we discussed so far. Yeah. The next slide, please. So the effects of stress, again, I think we've done this earlier on as well. So I would want all of you to just go through this, because it's important that if at all, if you see any of these effects on you, it could be insomnia is where people are not able to sleep. Hypersomnia is people sleep much more than what is required. And the pandemic has definitely influenced our sleep cycle. We are sleeping later in the daytime. We are sleeping, less in the nighttime. We are being awake more in the nighttime. The nights have become days, days have become nights. And that itself is influencing the way we eat. And there's a lot of weight fluctuations which happens, which also affects our moods. Right? It also influences how we manage frustrations and irritations and all of that. Right? The next slide, please. So as we move ahead, we would also need to look at how are we going to handle all of this. Yeah. And that's what I'm going on to as we move ahead. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I hope I'm audible. So what do we understand as we move ahead in stress management is it's very important that we look at 5 most important aspects of coping, right? So when we look at coping skills, what do we mean by coping skills? If you could move to the next slide, it will be helpful. So what do we understand as coping skills is whenever there is a demand on us, we are able to manage the demand. It could be something as academic stress, it could be health related stress, it could be relationship related stress. But when there is a demand, how are we able to cope with the demand? And that's what we look at stress coping skills, right? So usually what we talk about are skills which are helping is physical aspects, which could be where we move the body. So because we just now spoke about how the body and the mind are connected. So whenever there is any kind of physical movement, it could be dancing, it could be walking, it could be Zumba, it could be anything. I think you can move on to the next slide because we've done this. If you could move on to the next slide. Yeah. So we're talking about coping skills. Yeah. So it could be anything where you move your body. You can also go to the next slide because, yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah. So what do we understand in physical aspect is move your body, because we are talking about endorphins when you move your body, right? Then we look at social aspects. So it is when you have connections with, could be family, it could be friends. If you could just press a little more, then you get more points, bullet points. Yeah. So what do we understand? That's the second point is social aspects where you are meeting up with friends, even virtually is fine, because when you meet up with your friends, when you meet up with your family, have dinner together, or just do activities together, you're also releasing a lot of oxytocin, which is the cuddle hormone, which is the hormone which helps you to feel good and be together, right? So how does it help is when people are together, there is the social connectedness, there is the emotional connectedness, and that definitely helps in management of stress, right? So what do we understand here is the social connect. We also talk about behavioral aspects. So behavior is any verb which helps. So for example, any action. So it could be reading a book, it could be drinking some water, or it could be just relaxing on the couch. So, or watching TV for some time, not like 24 hours, of course. So anything which is a behavior which helps you to calm down and relax, right? We also talk about cognitive aspects, which could be taking care of the thoughts which you get. So because we always have this inner voice which says, you've not done enough, you've not been good enough, you could have done this better, compared to your friend, you've not got as much marks. So all of that questions in your mind can also be looked at. Is this really helping me here? Is thinking like this really helping me? Can I use a kinder way of thought process which inspires me and helps me to move ahead? And that's what we look at in the cognitive aspect, right? And the fifth aspect is using your five senses. So, you all know what your five senses are, right? So if somebody could type in the chat box, it will be very helpful what your five senses are. And we can use our five senses to look at, it could be smelling something nice, it could be eating something nice, it could be somewhere where you're looking at I'm just trying to join in from the laptop as well. Somewhere we are trying to look at keeping a candle or an aroma which helps us to relax, things like that. So the five aspects of coping: physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, and using the five senses. And that really helps. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Gayatri. Yes. So use all of these five senses as well to help you to calm down. Other ways are letting go, understanding that how much of, efforts you need to put in, and you put in your best, use the resources which are in your hand, and use that to help you to let go, right? So, you've done your best, and beyond this is beyond me, and I need to know where the boundaries are. I also need to understand that breathing, because we all know breathing really helps, right? So we need to understand that breath is something which we are born with, and we don't need any training to breathe, right? So I am coming out from this and joining in the laptop. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the support. So I will continue with this slide, and I will talk about effective management. I hope I'm audible again now. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I was talking to you about breathing slowly and deeply, because breathing is something we all are accustomed to. So when there is stress, there is definitely the body reacting to, heavy breathing, right? So we also talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So when there is anything worrying us, it is the sympathetic nervous system which takes over. That's when the heartbeat starts going faster. We start sweating. There are too many thoughts in our brain. There is a increased blood flow because we need to fight or fly away. So we need to start looking at breathing in, breathing slow, and breathing deeply, right? Breathing in, breathing out, being mindful about it definitely helps us to manage and switch over to the parasympathetic system, which is what is required to calm down, right? Practicing slow speaking. So many times what happens is there is a riot of, we call it the Rajdhani Express of thoughts, because there's too many thoughts happening inside our head. And that's when the speech becomes really, really fast. So when you start pacing your speech along with your breath, you also know that you're allowing your parasympathetic system to take over and calm down and relax. And when you are relaxed, you can also regulate. That's called co-regulation. You're also able to regulate other people's emotions, and you're able to look at calming down yourself as well as calming down others. Time management. So we all know that we have 24 hours, and we can decide in that 24 hours what are we going to do. Are we going to use this much time for sleep, this much time for recreation, this much time for studying, this much time for other activities? And that really helps us to look at deciding how much of what we need to do. Get out, get outdoors, go out, see the sunlight, get some vitamin D, move ahead, walk around, meet people. Even though you have your, PPEs and the masks and all that, meet people. Yeah, that's your, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, all of that, right? Eat well. So I'm talking about not junk, not binging. I'm talking about eat food which makes you healthy, right? Once in a while, of course, you can have your burgers and pizza and pasta and all that. That's also good for life, because you enjoy the goodness of life, but not every day. So we are also looking at eating nutritious food, whatever your people at home, your family cooks for you, your mother cooks for you. It's important that we look at our posture. So, slooped, drowsy postures definitely do not help, right? So constantly look at, are you having a straight spine? Look at something where you are having a good eye contact. Use time to, check your posture so that you are not straining your back and straining your body, right? End of the day, plan something rewarding, so that it need not be a big gift which you need to buy for yourself. It could also be a pat at the back and say, okay, good, well done. I am happy about what I've done in the day, right? It need not be always the perfect job. It could also be small baby steps moving ahead to leading you to the final goal. Yeah. The next slide, please. So what do we understand here is that when we are also grateful about what has happened in these days, and still we are back with things which we wanted to do. We are back in college, we are back at work, we are back at being with our family, we are having our health. All of that is what we need to be grateful about, and gratitude is a huge factor helping us in wellness. Take control. So looking at what can be inner resources, external resources, what are beyond us. That comes from the Russ Harris book, which talks about happiness trap. So Russ Harris is a psychologist again, who talks about happiness. And he says that, when you are looking at being perfect, happiness doesn't come. We are looking at what can be within my control and work on that, right? Connect with people. I think I've spoken that a lot. Having me time. So having said that, you need to connect with people. You also need to connect with myself, with yourself, because you are going to be with you all the time. So do not cut off you from yourself. Be with you, spend time with yourself, and have a good combination of spending time with your friends, with your family members, with your faculty members, with yourself as well. Yeah. Challenge. Whenever there is a requirement, challenge. Unhealthy habits, it could be too much of screen time, it could be substance, it could be putting yourself down. All of these are unhealthy. And if possible, help people. So it need not be giving 1 lakh on charity. It could be small things like, giving a little bit of food to your watchman's daughter or son, or helping them to learn some alphabets or reading, which definitely helps you to understand that, you are there as a human being supporting. And by helping or even appreciating other people, that is Samuel Goldwyn who spoke about, when you appreciate others, you're making 2 people happy. Of course, the person who got the appreciation and the person who gave the appreciation, because you are being humane, helping the other person. Realistic goals, very important. So when you have goals which are realistic, you know that you're not aiming at the sky. You are aiming at something which you can reach out definitely, right? Accept things which cannot be changed. So I cannot change the pandemic, but I can still keep myself healthy. And that's what we are looking at, taking control, understanding what's under my control. Yes. The next slide, please. So what do we understand as stress management? Definitely is action-oriented approaches and emotion-oriented approaches. So action-oriented approaches would be mostly how do we manage my time? So, I think all of us know about this, analyzing our jobs, understanding. So we also have this Eisenhower's grid, which talks about urgent, important aspects. So what is more urgent, more important comes in one side, and what is not so urgent, not so important comes in different durations and intensities. So we also look at which grid we can put our jobs, and then decide on how much time do we need to spend on each of this. Yes. Avoid multitasking. This is a question which many people ask me, how do we avoid multitasking? What I mean by avoid multitasking is, if you're doing two projects, don't do the projects together. Look at finishing one and then moving on to the next project. So what do we mean by multitasking is, if it is a very important task which requires a lot of prefrontal cortex, we call it the executive functioning. If it requires a lot of concentration, decision making, planning, prioritizing from your side, don't do too many activities at the same time. Yeah, but you can do as to, you can listen to music and eat your food, or you can walk when you're listening to music, because many of these things are also involuntary. So you don't actually have to focus when you are walking, if it is plain ground, not on a hilly terrain, not when you are doing trekking, that you can't work on the PC when you're trekking, of course. But what we are looking at is, doing things which are involuntary. That could be multitasking. But what I mean by multitasking is when you have to do driving and talking on the phone, things like that, or you're doing too many projects at the same time. Yeah. The next slide, please. So this is about time management, action-oriented aspects. Sleep is very important, because it's important that we also look at the circadian rhythm. Many a times what happens is that the circadian rhythm is going haywire, especially during the pandemic, because we can have classes at any time. And of course, now it's good that we have started offline. People have started going to schools and colleges. It also helps to have us, streamline the whole sleep cycle. Yes. Get up at the same time. I wouldn't say 7 days a week, that is too ambitious. At least 5 days a week when you have college. Yes. Exercise, I think I've spoken about that earlier. Yes. The next slide. I think I have only about 2 more slides. So of course, excessive liquids and caffeine. So check how much of coffee you are having. If you're having too much of coffee, then see to it that you don't drink too much, especially later on in the evening, because that keeps you awake and it definitely affects your sleep. Smoking, substance use is in the rise, especially now, and we do get a lot of people calling in asking for help in substance use. So that's something which I tell all human beings, despite the gender, we are seeing an increase in substance use, and it definitely affects the mental health. It's not just the mental health, it's also the physiological health. So any part of your body gets affected, be it the brain, be it the liver, be it your intestines. So it's important that we avoid substances, alcohol, marijuana, smoking, nicotine, any of that, right? And don't go to bed with your problem. See if you can solve it. And if you're not able to solve it, write it down on a paper, keep it in a place, so that you are telling yourself that I will come back to the problem and try and solve it the next day. Do not take the problem with you onto the bed, right? The next slide, I think I should be finishing in 1 or 2 slides now. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what do we understand is that, yeah, I think we can go ahead. This is just suggestions on how to keep the sleep hygiene better. The next slide also, please. So we also have this habit of, yeah, that's the last slide. Yeah. We also have a habit of, not keeping the sunlight on. So if you can have the curtains on in the morning, so that the sunlight comes in and the your body knows that you're time to get up. Yeah. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. This is by William James, who's a psychologist again, who talks about how it is important that we look at thoughts and not as facts. So if I think that I'm going to have an accident here and I will be definitely stressed, but I know it's just a thought, it's not a fact, right? We can be safe when we are here in any place. So what we are looking at is what are we thinking versus what is the fact, right? So it's also important for each one of us to be loving oneself, standing up for your rights and taking care of your body and your mental health, right? So all the best to all of you, and I would love to take questions and your reflections. Thank you. Can you please do the, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. So if there are any questions, please put it in the chat box. And if you have anything to add on to what, yes, ma'am.
Can I ask my question, ma'am?
Yes, please do.
Ma'am, can you give us some suggestions to cope up with stress before exam, ma'am?
Right. So as I was telling you in the curve, the Yerkes-Dodson curve, there is always that comfort level which we can work on, right? So if you know that the deadline is approaching, you know till what day you can go relaxed, right? So it also helps you in trial and error that, you know, suppose March 20th is your exam, till when is that, you know, you feel relaxed and rested. So if you can pace your studying at that time, it helps you not to get overly anxious. There is some bit of anxiety, which is the eustress, which helps you to pace. And if you think that now March 20th is my exam, and if you think by the 15th I start getting panicky, don't keep the difficult portions after the 15th. Try and do the earlier, you know, the difficult portions, take help from friends, take help from faculty members, pace yourself so that before the deadline, you are at least familiar with what is required. That's number one. Number two is don't be perfectionist in your planning. Because if you think that I need to have like 10 revisions before I finish, you know, reach March 20th, it becomes too unrealistic, because you also have your projects, you also need time to go out with friends, you also want to watch Netflix. So take time for all of that. Don't just study. Of course, college time is important to study, but you also need time for Netflix and Insta and, you know, friends, right? Your parents will hit me if I say that, but you also need that time, right? So what we are looking at is give time, share the time so that you also have time to relax and do other activities, right? So these two aspects very important. The third one is sleep and eat. So take care of your body, take enough rest so that you don't fall sick on March 19th and that becomes a stress, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Can I ask next question, ma'am?
Yes, Janani. Yes.
How do introverts relieve stress, ma'am?
Okay. Introvert, is that the question?
Yes, ma'am. Introverts relieve
Yes,
stress,
okay.
ma'am.
So this introvert, yes, okay. This whole concept of introversion versus ambiversion versus extroversion was brought in by a psychologist called Eysenck. And he spoke about the different personality traits, right? So if you look at it, we all fall in different levels. So there is no one person who's completely extrovert or completely introvert. We're all somewhere in the middle, right? We also have to understand that if you look at a lot of new research on introversion says that introverts are definitely much more resilient psychologically compared to people who move on to the higher levels of extroversion, right? So what we also understand is that people who are more on the introverted aspect are more aware of what could be internal and external stressors to them. And if you're not aware, take time, you know, either reflect, think about in this, you know, how old are you? 18, 19, 20? I can see Vigneshwari. Are you 19? Sorry for
Yes,
asking your
ma'am,
age.
19, 20.
19. Yes. Okay. So
That's all
yes.
right, ma'am.
Right. So, in this 18, 19, 20 years of your life, reflect on what has helped you manage the stress in different parts of your life. So you've had your board exams, you've had pandemics, you may have had, projects to complete, time pressures, you would have had a time when you had to travel. So they would have been different stressors, right? So look back on how you have managed. Okay. Those are aspects which help you to learn a lot about yourself. Look back also on places or instances where you've not managed. That also gives you a learning experience. So it's not to say you are a failure. It is to say that I had a problem, but I came out of the problem. And that has helped me to learn how to outlive the problem. And that's the feedback we are looking at. Right. So people who are onto this, this side of the spectrum of introversion are also very introspective. So they are able to reflect on what is happening. So that's why they take time off from the crowd and look at what has happened, what has helped me, what can I learn from this. And that cognitive aspect is what I was earlier talking about, coping skills. The cognitive aspects and the behavioral aspects definitely help these people to, manage the stress and move ahead. Yeah, does that answer you, Janani?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, one more question, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, how effective is exercising in reducing stress, ma'am?
Definitely. So if you remember, I had also spoken about coping skills, and in that, the first thing I said is physical activity. Right? Physical activity could be anything from walking to yoga to Zumba to gym or anything which involves moving the body. Okay, so there's this famous book called Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, who has done tremendous work on trauma-related research, right? So what he says, he's a psychiatrist, mental health professional again, who has done work with people who have been sexually abused, who have been victimized. And what he says is that the body remembers many things. Right. So when you do activities like physical activities like walking or Zumba or Taekwondo, it can be anything where you are moving your body, yoga or anything where you are moving the body. Okay. It helps the body, of course, the endorphins, which we are all aware of. It also helps the body to generate new cells. It also helps the body to release out the stress. So what happens is the body by itself also starts healing. So when you do therapies in psychological interventions like cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, solution focused brief therapies, all of this also talks about how the physiological aspects are important. And especially books like Body Keeps the Score. There's also another book by Peter Levin, which talks about, again, the physiological aspects called the Walking the Tiger, Waking the Tiger, not Walking, Waking the Tiger. These are books available. So people who are interested in learning about how the body-mind connection, please read very interesting books on how physical movements of the body helps. So people who dance, yes, please do more of it. People who love cycling, please do more of it. People who love to walk, please do more of it. And if you can do it together as a group, wonderful, because you have the endorphins, the dopamine, and the oxytocin all gushing together to help you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. We got medicine for good sleep and we came to know the stress management. The session was very informative and thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us. Got enlightened also.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. In spite of your busy schedule, you have spent the hour with us and you have explained all the stress coping techniques. It is really very, very important to all of us in this current scenario, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Have a good day.
Yes, ma'am. Announcement for the audience.
Announcement for the audience. Stay tuned with us for tomorrow's validating session on the topic Basics of Giving First Aid by Dr. Anita Tarigopal. Stay tuned. Take care, everyone.